Is it on page 14 for you? You have a bit of an updated. Is it page 14?
Yeah.
Got the takeaway?
A2 after this? Wait, is A1 marked or no?
I don't have a page.
Not marked. Not, okay, not for marks, for skill building, for scaffolding,
Okay.
right? Getting back into it and practicing. But just be clear. Can I get everyone's attention? You can put a line through that poem, right? You didn't write the metaphor poem. All you did was develop 3 of your metaphors and share them through the Socrative. But you do have to do this. You do need to do the takeaway. And previously when you've done takeaways, it's because you reread the big ideas. I don't think there are big ideas in this section, really. It just says the idea, and you can go back to the main page, maybe. This idea of the question, what is our country? Who are the people in our country? What makes us Canadian and not American? If we consume so much American media and even politics, as an example, like that's the big question of this, is what is the Canadian identity? And so you're trying to do your takeaway in the last page there. You're going to have to think about that question. From this section and the text that I read and the memes I looked at, what is the Canadian identity was the big question. That was the big idea, really, for this section here. What am I walking away with? Or what do I understand of this? Or what do I think it is now? Based on these texts, okay? That's how you can kind of frame it and then answer it. And don't forget, it's 2 parts to a takeaway. The first part is just to revisit, like, what was the point of this section before you move on to something else? Reflect on it. But the second part is to share a personal connection. What stood out to you personally from the stuff that we talked about, okay? And share that with me. The point of these takeaways is that you don't do work and then just close it up, hand it in and move on, but that you take a moment and just kind of reflect. What was the point of it? And how am I going to move that idea or notion forward, connecting to the next thing, okay? Okay. A1, I do want you to hand in, but I'm only just assessing really kind of completion and to get an idea of how well you completed ideas there. A2.
Bad.
What is happening with you?
You got lots of brain density.
That actually it's a compliment. Highly dense brains are more intelligent brains.
Rock hard brain.
So why is that wrong?
It's not.
Rock hard brain.
Pressing record. Here is the next section. Again, continuing with the Canadian focus here. Here's your cover page. There are a great many individuals in Canadian history that have, in their own ways, contributed to the concept of being a Canadian. The development of a national identity, this identity of, what it is to be Canadian, for example, or a whole country shared sense. It's different from being American or being British, but our national identity has come from years of people sharing their views on what is the important parts of our living. So it's a long time building. Again, remember, we're only 150 years old, so a very young identity even so. But the point is that there have been a lot of individuals that have contributed to that. Like, if I asked you to give me ideas of people that you think have played a part in establishing or contributing to this idea of what is Canadian, who would you say? Who are the people? Jaden, can you switch with me to here? Yeah, like if I said Diefenbaker, do you know who that is?
Yes.
One of the prime ministers from Saskatchewan. He was actually my grandmother's lawyer before he was in politics. Mm-hmm. He was the one that brought in the Bill of Rights, which then became entrenched as the Charter of Rights. Without his influence there, we wouldn't have the, protection of mobility or beliefs or all of that stuff. Who else? Are the Canadians that stand out to you? Yeah?
John Candy.
Oh, sure. Or there's others like him, like Dan Aykroyd,
Mike
right?
Myers.
A lot of Mike Myers, yep.
Myers.
Talented people,
Jim.
easygoing, good to get along with.
Jim Carrey.
Terry Fox,
Ooh, that guy, yeah. I forgot.
Michael Myers.
Michael who?
The
No,
Halloween movies.
no.
Okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to think. There've been a couple people that have done. There's one guy that was in a wheelchair. He's a famous Canadian. Do you know who I mean? I can't remember who he is, but he's contributed a lot. We've had a lot of influential people related to, building up our kind of Canadian national identity. Two major categories that contribute to your sense of identity comes from, the first one is relationships with people. You could circle that if you don't have anything else here. Relationships with people is your number one, and relationships with the land. Canadians have to have a strong relationship with the land because there's so much of it. In other countries where they have a much longer history on that country, there's overpopulation. They don't have space. We have nothing but space, right? So there's a very distinct and unique relationship that we have come to have with our landscape. But also we have a unique relationship with people. In some countries it is kind of like a homogeneous society, like they are a lot the same. If you go to places like Sweden or Finland or things like that, people learn to speak that language even if they immigrate into it. They have specific names that they're allowed to choose from to name their kids, to maintain that culture. Even the Mohawk Nation in Canada protects the history of their people. They don't want a lot of that influence from the outside in. Quebec is another example of that, that's fought for 150 years to maintain that French background because it's important to them, right? Even though they're surrounded by so much. And I know some people are trying to finish up your takeaways, but you really want to be paying attention to what we're currently doing, please. So this section here starts looking at this idea. Is it people that really influence your sense of being Canadian, or is it the landscape? That's the kind of question of this section here. It's going to include two texts, two essays, but they're written in a kind of story-like way, but they're truthful and they're first-hand accounts. That's why they're essays, written by Canadians who are famous for different contributions. And they both talk about this idea of what the source of their Canadian identity is. So, if you go on forward in your pages, this is the beginning of your section, right? There are many individuals who developed reputations because their contributions to issues important to Canadians. Through all areas of our culture and national identity, these contributions are made in areas of literature, science, sport, politics, poverty, art, language, religion, etc. Here are your big ideas. Question 1, what is the thing that contributes most to a person's sense of national identity? And here we mean Canadian identity. What is the key thing for you, if you can narrow it down to one thing, that contributes most to your Canadian identity or your parents' sense of Canadian identity? What is the thing that most contributes to your idea of what it is to be Canadian or being Canadian? Where does that come from? Number 2, what is the thing that most affected your sense of being a Canadian? What contributes to it and what has most influenced it? Was it where you grew up, or was it the lifestyle of where you grew up that demanded that lifestyle? If you grew up in the city, the concrete jungle, your lifestyle will be very different than if you've grown up in the prairies, on the farm, on the homestead. Is it the landscape that you grew up that contributed to your lifestyle? Was it your family and the people that you were surrounded by that contributed to your lifestyle, which of those two things would you say is more true? Where you grew up affected you more, or who you grew up around? Let me clarify that. Where you grew up, or who you grew up around? Yep. You most.
No.
Are you on A2?
Oh, I guess I am.
Okay.
It's just yours looks different because yours.
Just the third question's a
Oh.
little worded differently.
Oh, is it? Perfect. Okay, then that's great. Did question 1 and 2 seem, are question 1 and 2 the same on yours as on mine?
Question 1 is, question 2 is not.
Is not. What does question 2 say for you?
What is the thing that most affected your sense of being Canadian, Kenyan and death?
Same question.
It is the same,
It's
okay.
just an addition.
I'm kind of thinking in looking at this that these two are so similar. So you could make, put them together as one if you want, because it's hard for me to really tell them apart. But here's what I suggest to you. I'd like this to be our first kind of go off as a group and discuss. One of the reasons why you're taking ELA together with other people and why we start these conversations together is so that you can hear what each other has to say. You have experiences that he hasn't had and he'll benefit from hearing about them, especially if it's about a girl that barked like a dog.
Yeah, I've never had that.
I knew her.
On topic. Okay. Your voice got strangely high there. Okay. If I give you 10 to 12 minutes, let's say I give you 12 minutes, somebody's got to be a recorder, which means you could take your laptop and record it like that. You have to make sure that it gets to me. But I'll put 12 minutes on the clock. If you want to record it paper and pencil on your own, do that. You can walk outside and record it yourself. You can grab a group and go do a recording. But I'm going to put 12 minutes on the clock. And I'll see you back very shortly. So most of you got together with somebody else, did recordings of what you think you've most been influenced by. If you come on down here to the bottom part of this page here, it says, take a second and do a quick search of David Suzuki and Pierre Burton. These are the two authors of the essays that you're going to be reading. And I think we can save ourselves some time if half of you want to quickly look up David Suzuki, figure out what we should know about him before we read his essay. The other half can quickly look up Pierre Burton. If you like history, for example, Pierre Burton was a journalist, but he also wrote several histories. Historica, it's called, of Canada. He grew up in the Yukon, so he's got quite an interest in writing books about Canada's north. David Suzuki, you may be familiar with the Suzuki Foundation or David Suzuki himself, an environmentalist. Also lived through Canada's Japanese internment camps. Born in Canada, but was taken in and had to stay with his family, separated from father, in an internment camp. So can I get some hands up of who's going to look up David Suzuki?
Suzuki.
Okay, so that sounds good because that's a few people, and then the rest of you, I guess, are looking up Pierre Burton. Does that sound right? Okay. You can write down on your own copy the things that you discover, and then we'll combine them together and kind of split the job. Who can tell me anything about either of these two men? Jess?
David Suzuki has a PhD in zoology.
Okay. He is an environmentalist. That's a big thing. Okay. Who else had hands up? Sam?
Pierre Burton was born in Whitehorse, Yukon. What? I know.
What's going on with these?
My brother lived there for a while, so that's interesting. Yeah, Whitehorse. Okay, Connor?
I was gonna say Peter Burton is known along with Canada's best known artists.
Artists or authors? Authors.
I wrote down artists.
Sure, one of Canada's best known authors. Yep. What else? Suzuki or Burton, what can you tell me? Jess?
Suzuki is a graduate from Chicago, and he was a professor in a genetics department in the University of British Columbia.
He has studied genetics in particular. Genetics is, character traits passed down.
Yeah, he's had a broadcasting career.
Broadcast. You're talking Suzuki?
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, it's both, but broadcasting career. Anybody else? Cam?
Your Burton was a history major.
History.
Historian.
I'll put this down. It's Canadiana. Canadiana. It's the phrase for Canadian history, Canadian specific history. I think his one book in the Yukon is one of the most popular books. This guy also was, like a TV personality. But so is this guy. Do you guys know the nature of things? So both have had great contributions to Canada. What nobody has mentioned yet about Suzuki is that he is the son of Canadian immigrants. But he was born in Canada. And for Burton, he spent his childhood and youth in, how would we describe it? In the north, isolated, a Yukon cabin, not around a lot of people, not in cities and around other people very, very much. Okay? And if I bring you back up to this part up here, so both of these gentlemen are recognized as contributing to Canadian culture. One of these authors asserts or claims it's the people that you are around that contributes to your sense of Canadianness. And the other author suggests that it's your experience of where you come from, not the people that you're around, but where you grow up. The Yukon North compared to the Saskatchewan Flat Prairies, compared to the maritime environment, that it's where you grow up that contributes to your sense of being Canadian and not the people that you're around. Okay? So you're going to start off here, and you still have a few minutes just to kind of get set up for this. You're going to read this essay. Again, it's an essay because it's first person true story kind of thing. Story-like, but somebody's first-hand real-life account. In his essay, David recounts his first experience going to Japan, the country of his parents' origin, where his ancestors were. It was his first time. Though he looked identical to the people that he was surrounded by, he found he had nothing in common with them. So just kind of get a sense of that. It's the homeland of your genetic line for someone who is a geneticist and studies character traits and how they contribute and pass down. He went to where he came from and was surrounded by people that looked like him and found that he had nothing in common with those people. And he struggled once he realized that. It was quite a disappointment for him, this trip that he had anticipated. and finally took, and it didn't turn out the way he had expected. So you're going to read that essay on your own. So this is going to require some reading skills, comprehension. But while you do that, you're going to look for a few things. Like some authors do, he uses some Japanese words and language. He talks about people by generation as isi, nisi, sansei, and yonsei. What you'll see in this chart here, and it's important that you guys practice and get used to reading charts and filling out charts, I've given you information for each of the rows to help you figure out what fills in the blank spots. And each of the columns has info. So that's going to be your test tomorrow. Oh, and I have ice cream treats for people.